and Happy New Year. My name is Fatima Venzer, and on behalf of the entire UC Santa Barbara Economic Forecast Project team, I'd like to welcome you to our first update of 2021. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and also closed captioning is available for those that need it. For those of you in attendance today, you will receive an email once the recording is available to watch, and you'll be able to open up that email and click the link for both the recording and the resources for today. Today we are joined by Public Health Director Vaughn Do Reynoso for the County of Santa Barbara, and also Dr. Lynn Fitzgibbons, Infectious Disease Specialist for Cottage Health. Throughout today's webinar, we encourage you to submit the questions that you have for our speakers using the Q&A box. And you can find that Q&A box either at the top or the bottom of your screen. And Dr. Peter Rubert will be managing those questions and answers throughout today's presentation. And so now I'd like to introduce Professor Peter Rubert, who is the Executive Director of the UC Santa Barbara Economic Forecast Project. Peter?
Great. Thank you so much, Fatima. It's wonderful to have Vaughn on today and Lynn. Before we get started, I'd just like to say I can never recall if I ever shed a tear of anything that happened on Capitol Hill. But yesterday was quite a dark day for the United States. And, I hope we get beyond this, just like we're going to hopefully get beyond the pandemic. So before we get going, and part of what we're doing today is educational. I'd like to do a quick poll. So Zoom allows us to do polling. And so here's our poll. And the poll says, if the vaccine were available to you today, would you get it? And then the answers are definitely get it, probably not get it, or definitely not get it. So we'll launch the poll. It's all anonymous. You just click in. And like I said, it's all anonymous. No one knows who's answering these. So we'll let it go on for a few seconds till we get some people to respond. Okay, a few more seconds. Okay, some people still responding, that's good. Okay. So we'll end the poll there. I think I can share these results. Can people see those results? Okay. So 72% of you said that you would definitely get it. Another 17% probably get it. 7% said probably not get it, and 4% definitely not get it. And what we're hopefully doing today is, trying to get people to understand a little bit more about what's going on with the vaccine, what it will do, the rollout, et cetera. So that's where we'll go. So for now, I want to just spend a couple minutes talking about just a little quick update, virus, vaccines, and the economy. I want to talk just briefly about what's gone on in the economy just for a few minutes. I know everybody's excited to hear what Vaughn has to say, and then later on Lynn. So, basically, what we've seen is that today jobless initial claims came out. They remained elevated. They are very, very high, not really going down very much. We had a bunch of new lockdowns over the holidays, of course. We really haven't seen the results of that yet. I'm sure we'll see that. You probably know that the stock market is setting daily records, of course. More stimulus checks are out there. And just as a quick reminder, where these things come from, these are all pretty much debt financed by the governments. And so, these are going to have to be paid back. They're necessary at this time, but we have to remember that. But one thing I also want to mention is, this is kind of a new event for us, the pandemic, and the way we responded, maybe we could have responded better had we prepared a little bit more. But anytime you make policy on the fly, not always the best decisions occur. And let me just give you one quick example of the California relief grants. For small businesses to apply for these grants, what they ask you to give is your revenue. So you're giving them your revenue, but what people fail to realize somewhere in the government is that costs have also gone up a lot, in the sense that they said you couldn't work indoors. We have to go outdoors. So people built parklets. They have to use propane heat. They have to wash down the facility more often, et cetera. So for whatever reason, they decided to do revenue. So even though your revenue may have stayed the same since last year, costs might have gone up a lot. So that's one of those things I mentioned that making these policies on the fly, if we had thought a little bit more about it, maybe we'd be a little more equitable in that regard. So what are we seeing in Santa Barbara County? Well, this graph basically shows you that compared to the Great Recession, where we saw about a 10% unemployment rate, in the early months of the pandemic, we were up over 14%, 14.5%. Different than the Great Recession or any recession, it came down very fast as government decides what should be open and what shouldn't be open. And that's purely a function of the governmental decisions. The labor force, so this is the number of people in Santa Barbara County who are either employed or unemployed. And you can see that, we lost about, somewhere around 30,000 individuals out of the, about 20,000 individuals out of the labor force. They've come back, about half of them have come back. This is what a picture of non-farm employment looks like. And by the way, the reason many people talk about non-farm is that sometimes it's very hard to measure the farm sector. And so typically the US Government Bureau of Labor Statistics tends to look at non-farm employment. But you can see again what's happened in Santa Barbara County, went from about 190,000 down to 160,000. We lost 30,000 there. And as you'll notice, we've come back about halfway. We're still a long, long way to go to get back where we were, no doubt about that. This is retail employment, again, in Santa Barbara County, and you can see that huge losses, similar, larger than the Great Recession, and much, much quicker, and we're also rebounding quicker. But again, we still have a long way to go. This is leisure and hospitality, probably the two most affected areas that we had. And again, you can see that the top two are food and drinking establishments. Between the two components, hospitality and food and drinking has more employees, around 17,000, 19,000 employees in 2020 at the beginning. You can see the drop in that, falling from about 19,000 down to about 10,000. So in that one industry alone, one sector alone, we lost 9,000 workers. Now we're back to 17,000, so we've gained there. If you look at the accommodation side of things, hotels, again, huge drop off. Never seen anything like this before in just a couple of months. We inched back a little bit, pretty much flattened out. So that sector is certainly being hurt. And if you look at unemployment rates, this is not for Santa Barbara County, this is for the entire United States. Just getting back to what I was saying, if you look at unemployment rate, which is in red for leisure and hospitality, almost 40% unemployment rate in that sector. This was hugely hit sector and continues to move along. As I mentioned, weekly initial claims came out today. Let me explain what these are. Weekly initial claims are first-time applications for unemployment insurance. And you can see what I mentioned earlier. It's been high, around 800,000 a week in the United States. So every week, about over 800,000 people are applying for unemployment insurance. Remember, not everybody gets unemployment insurance, even though they may apply for it. These are what are called continued claims. These are people who have received unemployment insurance and continue on. So these are the individuals who are unemployed for more than a week. And you can see we're up around 5 million. That's been coming down a little bit, obviously not as fast as all of us had hoped. And again, as I mentioned, the holidays, we may start to see some longer term effects of this. Where things really matter, I think, in the longer run is something like this. This is the fraction of the unemployed individuals who've been unemployed for 27 weeks or more. This is half a year or more, basically. You can see what happened during the Great Recession. The Great Recession took a long time for this to happen. By the way, if you look today, 6 months in, not everybody was unemployed for 27 weeks or more, because we're not that long into it yet, 8 or 9 months. But I expect to see that's going to rise some more. Why is it difficult? It's difficult because long-term unemployment, being unemployed for more than 27 weeks, you lose skills. It's hard to get back to the workforce. These things have long-term effects. Just a quick couple questions about health, and Vaughn will talk more about this, as will Lynn. So I asked that poll at the beginning, and that question I got on that poll, it was a similar question from the Kaiser Family Foundation. There they surveyed about 1,800 people, 1,700 people, I think. And this is what people were saying, that 41% would definitely get it, compared to what we saw was about 70%. Another 30% would probably get it. But here we saw about 17% of people saying they would either not get it or probably not get it. That increased since September, when they did that survey before. So we're starting to see people get more educated, more understanding of what's happening with the vaccine. But to me, this is a more serious matter in that, these events, the vaccine should really not be anything about across different political spectra, across individuals. And you can see from their poll, something I found just incredible, that these are people who are hesitant to get the vaccine. So this is the fraction of people who would probably not get it or definitely not get it. And you can see what tops the list is Republicans. Right below that is an age group 30 to 49. Rural residents not getting it. Black adults are pretty high. One of the amazing things are essential workers. And Vaughn will talk a little bit about this in her group. 33% say they will not get it or probably not get it. And then you go down the list, and you can see, down here, 65 and over, only 15% said they would not get it, things like that. So this should not be about, different races or sex or age. We should really be there, to try to figure this out. And what I mean by that is we have to decide what it is, and this is where the public health sector comes in. We have to decide for ourselves what the goal is. Is the goal to reduce the number of deaths? Is the goal to reduce the spread of the vaccine, the virus, et cetera? And once we can understand those goals, we can better understand what it is we're trying to do in terms of lockdowns, et cetera. And we can talk more about that. In any event, I now want to introduce Vaughn Do Reynoso, who, as was mentioned, is the Director of Public Health here in Santa Barbara County. Vaughn, you can unmute yourself, and it's really great to have you here. And I can tell everybody out there listening, both Vaughn and Lynn, 16-hour days are now the common thing. These are amazing individuals working hard for all of us. So I really appreciate you being here, Vaughn.
Great, thank you, Peter, and thank you for this opportunity to share about our efforts in the Public Health Department. So I have a few slides that I'd like to share, if possible. I can't find it now. I'm not able to find it. I wonder why.
You mean the screen share?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm on a Mac, you're on a PC, but.
Vaughn, if you click on have you clicked on the share screen
Yes.
button in Zoom?
Yes.
Great. And then the next thing is you should be able to choose from the different windows that you have open. One of those windows should be where your PowerPoint is.
Okay, hold on. I apologize. This
That's
is
okay.
not. Hold on 1 second. Are you able to see it?
No.
And we practiced this
You did.
too. So, how about
There
now?
we go. There we go.
Perfect.
And then you can just do the full slideshow, and you're up.
Yes, there you go. Thank you. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking about our vaccine efforts. We have received and we've published this information. Thus far, we've received about 16,775 doses. And as of noon today, We just ordered 4,900 more doses for our community, and we anticipate to order 7,200 additional doses next week. So we are getting more vaccines. And what's the holdup is that we want to make sure that every time we order vaccines that our providers, our approved providers have the capacity to quickly administer those doses and that they're not sitting in the freezer or refrigerator. So that's why we're doing it sequentially. In addition to this, we currently, last week, we had 12 providers that we were allocating vaccines to. We have, as of Tuesday, 42 approved vaccinators, providers who can offer vaccines at their sites. So we anticipate being able to distribute these new allocations to more than the original 12. And we are getting both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. The Pfizer being mostly the vaccine that is being distributed by the hospitals, and the Moderna by the rest of our allocated or approved providers. Early on in the conversation, the state, as well as the federal entities, talked about tiers 1, and then tiers 2, and then tiers 3. Tier 1 being the acute care hospital workers, the psychiatric hospitals, correctional facilities, dialysis center staff, all the way to tier 3 being lab workers, dental workers, pharmaceutical workers. But within, as of Sunday, we had received different direction or nuanced direction from CDPH, which is, if we've done our due diligence in providing vaccines to the tier 1, that we can proceed on to tier 2 and tier 3. So here in Santa Barbara County, we are going through phase 1A with the 3 tiers concurrently, because we want to make sure that all the vaccines that we've allocated to the providers are getting into arms and not sitting in refrigerators and freezers. So again, we, depending upon the providers, we are doing all tiers concurrently. And one of the reasons why we're able to do that too in our county, which Peter, you alluded to earlier, what has been surprising is the hesitancy among those who are eligible to receive the vaccine, because the number of people who are hesitant and declining at this time to receive the vaccine, we're able to move past tier 1 and going to tier 2 and tier 3 because of the availability of vaccines. So anyone who is eligible can receive it. And we have 2 websites where people can pre-register, if you will, if they are a healthcare worker, if they are a healthcare provider, they can go to our website, our email, vaxproviders@sbcphd.org, to register their practice, and we will notify them when it's their turn or when we have availability. And for the community members who may not be in the phase 1A, they can go to our public health, sbc.org/vaccine for more information on when they would be eligible. And for any broad questions, we have an email. It's vaccine@sbcphd.org. Again, it's vaccine@sbcphd.org. If they have any questions about where they stand or how they may get vaccinated. So that's a general email that we have assigned staff to monitor that email so that we can get timely information to our community. And vaccinations are given at a variety of locations. We are offering them at our public health point of distribution sites. And so we have one in Santa Barbara, one in Lompoc, and one in Santa Maria. Right now, the first pod happened on Tuesday in Santa Barbara with 200 appointments given to our emergency responders. And we were in Santa Maria yesterday, and we are in Lompoc today. And we are now expanding those sites to 300 appointments per day. And we're anticipating even as early as next week to offer 500 appointments per day, and within 3 weeks. So the last week of January, we're anticipating running 1,000 shots a day at any of our pods. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, we have healthcare providers. We have retail pharmacies who are going to come online. This week, part of our allocation went to retail pharmacies at Albertsons and at Ralph's, who will have the capacity to not only partner with us and vaccinate pharmacists and pharmacy techs, but also the remainder of the people in phase 1A, and certainly as we move towards phase 1B, being able to support us in those efforts as well. And so we're very excited about this new partnership with the retail pharmacies. And more urgent care centers are coming on board and willing to partner up with us as well. So we anticipate that moving forward in the next few weeks, we're going to see many more entities being able to offer vaccines beyond the 12 that we are vaccinating today. So we anticipate that as we double down and expand our phases, our tiers, and making sure that our goal is to finish vaccinating the phase 1A by the end of next week. So we're looking at phase 1B relatively quickly, and so perhaps as soon as in 2 weeks. And the people in phase 1B include persons age 75 or older, the essential workers, including food and ag workers, including workers in education and childcare, first responders, EMS personnel, and then going on to tier 2, just like what we saw in phase 1A, I am anticipating an allowance from the state to allow us to concurrently run through the tiers in phase 1B as well. But that's purely anticipation on my part. But I do think that here locally, we will be guided by our data, our epidemiological data with regards to outbreaks. I am concerned that we prioritize congregate living situations like incarcerated individuals, like the homeless shelters. And so those are high on our priority list and may be prioritized into tier 1 of phase 1B. And more to come from the state. We are waiting for state guidance on what phase 1C will look like, as well as phase 2 and 3. We do anticipate that with additional vaccines coming on board, and I know that Lynn will be talking about those vaccine availability, that we will look at being able to do mass vaccination sometime in late March or early spring. And so we are building our infrastructure by bringing on additional vaccine providers, so that when we do mass vaccinations, it will the opportunity to get vaccines will be widespread throughout our county. And that ends my presentation.
Great, thanks so much, Vaughn. That's a lot of stuff going on there, and so while we're waiting for Lynn, I think it's a good time to maybe try to answer a couple of questions that people have had. Obviously, there's a ton of questions out there, I can tell you. We'll try to get to as many as we can before Lynn gets on. So the categories are pretty broad. A couple different people have asked, where do real estate agents fit in this, if you have a sense of that?
I don't off the top of my head, but I do want to, in the spirit of not misquoting myself, if you go to our website, we have listed, so as the best to our knowledge, all the different specific sectors and where they may lie in the phases and the tiers. Okay. So it would be our website that would have the most accurate information.
Got it. And so, we have a large agricultural sector and obviously many undocumented individuals out there. Is there a particular way that you're reaching out to some of the undocumented individuals who?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so early on, I'm not sure if you've heard of our Latinx and Indigenous Migrant COVID-19 Response Task Force, but we had been, we're working hand in hand with that task force, which we stood up. And in that task force are numerous community partners. And we have been talking about, and in anticipation, the rollout, the worries, the questions that the ag workers may have, working also in anticipation with our ag producers and our ag commission so that those questions can get addressed.
Okay. So do you have a sense of like how many vaccines need to be administered before we start to reach something that looks like herd immunity, or that we can start to open up a little bit more? Is there any number out there that you've seen?
Somewhat. We've heard anywhere from 60 to 80% vaccination uptake in order to achieve herd immunity. That's huge.
That's huge. I
That
agree.
is huge.
Yep. Yeah. Will patients be able to choose which of the vaccines they're getting? Or
Unfortunately, no. We get allocated a specific, so right now what we're given is the Moderna vaccine, and so we give that to our providers. And other than the hospitals, we have not given Pfizer to any of our healthcare providers just because of the rigorous administration of the vaccine and the rigorous protocol around safeguarding the vaccine and the temperature requirements and all of that.
Okay. This was not asked by me, but I'll ask it anyway. Are universities included in the education?
Yes.
The university faculty, staff, etc.?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, Lynn's not on yet, so we have a few more.
There was a question about, oh, I'm sorry, Peter. There was an earlier question about undocumented community members, and may I answer that question?
Sure, please do.
So just like we were really intentional about making sure that our undocumented community members are protected early on in the testing process, the public health department healthcare centers made available the opportunity to test and get treatment without any worries around documentation status. Moving forward towards vaccination, that commitment holds true. And so I think that the state seconds that. I believe that worry has been heard, and we will do everything, at least in our system, to safeguard that. I've gone through the system, and so far it is name and address and phone number in order to make sure that we can track adverse reactions, and in order to make sure that we have the data to document that as an individual they've received a vaccine and when to call them back for the second vaccine. So assurances are in place for every member of our community to get the vaccine when they are eligible and should they want it.
Okay, oh, that's great. That's great. I'm not sure if you know the answer to this one. Can employers mandate their employees get vaccinated?
No. Because it is under emergency use authorization, employers cannot mandate at this point. So I anticipate that when it is fully approved, so maybe in 2 years after the complete rigorous clinical trials and there is full approval, that's the point where employers can mandate.
I see. And so do you have a sense of, several people ask this question, you know, if you're in your 60s, 64 say, but no underlying health conditions, do you have a sense of when, like, the general public or those individuals would likely get vaccinated?
I would say the general, well, if you're not in the phase 1A or phase 1B, the mass will get the mass vaccination opportunity will be late March or early April.
I see. Okay. What else do we have here that's good? I think the same question. We have a question about outreach to the African American population.
Yes.
Is that similar to the what you're mentioning before?
Yes. So right now, because we are focused on getting through phase 1A, we have begun conversations with community members around availability and uptake of vaccines when it becomes available. So I think that one of the values that we want to hold true to is making sure that all members of our community, especially those in our health equity metrics region, would have the most information available and most opportunity available to get the vaccine should they want it. So that means heavy partnership with our community members and trusted community leaders to be able to partner up with us.
Got it. I think you already answered this one. You're tracking adverse reactions to this, obviously.
Yes.
Great.
Not only us, but it feeds into the CDC. So when someone gets the vaccine, there's a QR code or there's a website that they enter in and they're registered. And if there's an adverse reaction, it goes through a line list of, you know, how severe is your headache? How severe are your chills? How severe are your body aches? And you get tracked, and if it's severe, then you get notified by one of our team members or a CDC personnel.
Okay, got it. You know, as I mentioned before, I mean, I think that, you know, the United States reaction to some of this got very disaggregated very fast. You know, first they said it's up to the states, and then the states said some of it's up to the counties. Someone just mentioned that Washington State announced that all people over 70 and people over 50 in multi-generational settings are going to be offered the vaccines in January. So, you know, why are the states so different in the way they're approaching this?
I think that CDC comes out with broad guidelines, and then there's that loophole, right? That says, well, these are our guidelines that prioritization of the vaccine in limited circumstances should be by phase 1A and then the tiers, phase 1B and then the tiers, phase 1C, then the tiers, and then so given that there's that tiny loophole that states, based upon their epi data, can nuance that. And so we, as a local public health department, we follow our California Department of Public Health and their guidance. And so I think that it's a fluid situation, whereas 2 weeks ago, it was you need to follow at the local level, tier 1 of phase 1A. And because we saw that the availability of vaccine due to hesitancy, and we were able to move to 1B and 1C, and now we're given permission to run it concurrently. Nuance to that is also if there are continual outbreak situations in a given jurisdiction, the public health department has the ability to move the sector higher up. And so here we are considering moving up our homeless shelters, our jails, our juvenile hall personnel. And so that's the flexibility that we do have as a local jurisdiction.
I see. So I see Lynn has joined us. I don't see her face yet, but she's here. There are many questions that were out there that are more towards Lynn's area than yours, Vaughn. So I'm going to keep a couple of those. And Lynn is now on. So now we'll move to Lynn Fitzgibbons. Vaughn, if you're able to stay on, and maybe there'll be more questions after Lynn. But we certainly understand how busy you are. And I just want to say, how much I appreciate all you've done. And I think, it's very hard being in Vaughn's position. I can tell everybody that everybody is mad at Vaughn at some point or another just because of the way it is. And so I have to say, I really appreciate all you're doing and the thoughts you've given to all this. And, anyway, so now let me introduce Lynn Fitzgibbons, infectious disease specialist at Cottage Hospital. And Lynn, you can take it away.
Thank you. And can I actually, before I even start, could I just echo what Peter just said? I have a view of what Dr. Duranoso does. And man, she has a very incredibly challenging position, critical position. And I'm just I think, Vaughn, thank you very much for all you do. From on behalf of, I think, everyone in the hospital, sincerely. So thank you.
Thank you. Back to you.
She's only working 16 hours a day.
I happen to know she's working 25 hours a day because those are when I get the emails.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Without further ado, let me please share my screen, and I'll give everyone an update. So, you guys seeing that now? Peter, can I just get confirmation?
It's there. Yep, it's there.
Perfect. So we're going to review where we are briefly, because that, I think, is clearly the foundation for this entire conversation. Then we're going to focus squarely on vaccine from my perspective as an infectious disease physician. So where are we? Here we see a graphic from the community dashboard partnership with Vaughn's incredible EPI team and Legacy Works. And it starts back in September, and it takes us to yesterday. And it's showing us here the number of new cases diagnosed or reported to the public health department on any given day. We all remember what now we realize were the sleepy days of September and October. And then unfortunately, things have clearly escalated with, I would say, just breathtaking speed. When we then now transition to looking at the hospital, again, from the beginning of the epidemic to now, we look back on the summer surge, which at the time felt huge. And we, of course, realized that the pace that we're moving, the heights that we're moving with regards to the number of people in the hospital are record-breaking, unprecedented, week over week, day over day, really. There's a subtle but critically important aspect to this slide I want to point out, which is, unfortunately, in these last several days, we have now, started to really be on the border where we're potentially needing what are called surge beds. When we say we're running out of capacity as a region or as a county or even as a hospital, we talk about dropping from, I would say, the black to the red. There's been a lot of 0% capacity discussion. And I want to make sure everyone is emphatically clear. That does not mean if we drop below 0%, that the doors close, we lock the doors, and no one else gets into the ICU or into the emergency room or into another part of the hospital. What it really means is, beyond that capacity, we're going to have to take care of patients with less staff, with less resources, possibly with less physical beds. And those are, I think, the challenges that we're facing. The buzzword for that is surge. And so when we start taking care of patients in surge capacity, that's what we basically mean. And that's what we're starting to see, unfortunately, even required here in Santa Barbara County, is that we're now starting to have to lean on surge. This is, I think, the most important graphic for the hospital's planning. This is a graphic that takes us from early November to, again, yesterday. And in blue, you see the number of patients who are in the ICU across the county, period, no matter why they're there. This is just how many ICU patients we have. And what you see with this very worrisome trend upwards are the number of patients in the ICU with COVID. The reason I point this out as the most important predictive feature for hospitals and anticipating capacity strains is that back in November, a tiny fraction of the people in the ICUs had COVID. And the difference between someone who has COVID and someone who doesn't have COVID can be very broad ranging. But one of the most important pieces is that a patient with COVID who's in the ICU almost always is going to be more resource intensive. They may need more, they may be there for much longer. And so just one more patient in the ICU with COVID could mean that ICU bed is consumed, is needed, and the staff to take care of that person for perhaps 2-3 weeks. And that's why, again, the fact that now we have just this remarkable 80+% of the patients in Santa Barbara County in the ICU now with COVID, or approximately 80%, I think is again, perhaps the most worrisome graphic to me today. So how are we going to solve this problem? I think vaccines are a huge part of that, and that's what we're here to talk about. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that vaccines are not going to solve what I just showed you. Vaccines are going to help those curves in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. What we know is that those curves are absolutely reliant on the guidance that Dr. Dorinoso, Dr. Ansorg, infectious disease docs, and others around the community are telling us with regards to preventing further spread of this disease. I want to jump now straight into vaccines squarely, but I want to be clear. Vaccines are, again, a way for our community, I think, to prepare to be well protected. It is not protection this very moment at a community level, is simply the fact of the matter. And so please do heed all of their excellent instructions with regards to preventing further spread and helping us bring that curve back down. So the vaccines that are available right now across the United States are really, there are of course 2 flavors. We have the Pfizer biotech vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. These are the first 2 that have been authorized by the FDA, not approved, but authorized under an emergency use authorization. They're what are called mRNA vaccines. And what that means is this vaccine, if you follow on the left here, the graphic from the New England Journal of Medicine article, which I really recommend. There's some great graphics in it. But basically, we're going to inject a piece of mRNA, not a whole virus. You can't catch COVID-19 from these mRNA vaccines, but encoded in some lipids, and you inject it. And then a person's own cell takes that recipe, I like to say, that piece of mRNA, and does what it's supposed to do. It reads it and it makes a protein. It makes the protein it's supposed to make. And the protein in this case is the virus's protein, called the spike protein. And so then that little piece of spike protein can circulate around the body, and our own immune system recognizes it as not self. It does not belong here. We have never seen this spike protein before. and it learns how to take care of it. It makes, we make antibodies, we make memory T cells, and our immune system is basically primed to handle that spike protein if or when we ever bump into, inhale, or are otherwise exposed to that protein on the actual virus in the future. I want to point out that mRNA technology has received a lot of interesting, I think, opinion and press this year. But to be emphatically clear, mRNA technology for vaccines was not invented this year. This has been over a decade in the making. So it's new, but it's not unknown. It was a technology that, again, has been developed. And I like to think of it as a technology that was waiting for a disease. One of the most attractive parts of mRNA technology is that it's scalable. Other vaccine technologies, while effective, not as effective as this, interestingly, they're often very difficult to manufacture the vaccines. And mRNA technology is such that not only can we scale up the production quickly, but as we think about things like the variant out of the United Kingdom, the variant out of South Africa, which of course, the United Kingdom variant we're finding across the United States, including here in Southern California, one of the attractive pieces of mRNA vaccines is if we ever needed to modify the mRNA to adjust to a new version of the spike protein, it's also flexible. To be clear, we're not doing that at this point. The mRNA that's in the vaccine is set, it's clear. That's what the data I'm going to show you is based on. But again, just another nice aspect of the mRNA vaccines. I mentioned other other vaccine types are in development. The Pfizer vaccine, I think everyone now knows, is 2 doses, which are given ideally 3 weeks apart. A little bit of flexibility in this, a small number of days, but that would be aspirational, be 3 weeks apart. Moderna, very similar, slightly longer window. And as I mentioned, there have been a lot of work done on both of these vaccines, and I'm going to review some of the clinical trial data, particularly for the Pfizer vaccine. So the Pfizer vaccine phase 3 data was really, it was the kind of efficacy, the kind of benefit that we've really never seen with vaccines before. Vaughn and I closely follow, for example, the flu vaccine efficacy every year. Some years, it's 15%, some years it's 45%, some years it's 60%. We're thrilled when we get close to 50 or 60% for flu vaccine efficacy. When we look though at the, approximately 40,000 people that were reported in the New England Journal of Medicine article from the Pfizer phase 3 trial, those in red are the ones who received vaccine, and it was randomized. You either got the real vaccine or you got a dummy vaccine that we call placebo. And when they followed these 2 big groups of patients, 18,000, 21,000 in each of these arms, basically, it was just amazing how little COVID-19 developed, symptomatic COVID-19, in those who got the vaccine compared to those who got the dummy vaccine, the placebo. And in fact, the protection looked really, really good when we look at severe COVID, which is less common, only 9 in those who didn't get the real vaccine, but still only 1 person out of 21,000 developed severe COVID after getting the vaccine. And it's this data that gave us this 95% efficacy, which we've now, it's part of our language, part of our script on talking about vaccines, but we should definitely pause and recognize this is an incredible protection. This graphic, I think, tells us that protection just beautifully. Here, if you follow me, we have the days from when the person receives their first dose of the vaccine on out to 112 days. And then you have the likelihood, you have the likelihood of someone then becoming sick with COVID-19, what we call the cumulative incidence. And what you see here in blue are the group that got, again, the dummy vaccine, the placebo. And as you would expect, they didn't get anything that was going to protect them. And so they were living in this world with the pandemic. They were, as a group, presumably sometimes exposed. And so you do just see this kind of expected linear trend upwards with the group who received placebo. But look at what happened with the group who received the vaccine. For the first maybe 7, 10, 12 days, there's no difference. We would expect that. But then suddenly, this group stops developing COVID-19. Suddenly, this group really has almost no, perhaps 1 or 2 more cases, and just develops this incredible protection. And so the authors, this is from the New England Journal article, the authors have blown up that first 3 weeks for us. And we see that where these lines depart is right around 12 days, 10 to 12 days. What about the side effects? Because this is, I think, perhaps the most important question when we're talking about people being what we call vaccine hesitant, asking good questions. You know, is the vaccine really safe? It's gone awfully fast. And I think the answer is we now have, of course, now 4 or 5 months of experience with these vaccines. When we include the clinical trial people, as well as, of course, a lot of healthcare workers now receiving vaccine around the country, around our community. There have been a fair amount of local reactions, as well as systemic reactions. Of course, more in those who received the real vaccine than the dummy vaccine, but most of them were mild to moderate and resolved rapidly. And we can't gloss over, it's very important to point out that the vaccine really needs to be given in a place that can handle the very rare event of an allergic reaction. This should be the case for all vaccines, but very important with this. And with Vaughn's group, with the hospital group setting up vaccine clinics, we're making sure that we have the ability, as we're told we must by the state and by our local health department, to handle any sort of allergic reaction. Again, it's a very rare incidence of these allergic reactions, but very important for us to be ready to handle any sort of allergic reaction, especially given the volume of people that we're potentially vaccinating. I'm not going to go through this slide, but I want to draw everyone's attention to it, that if you are a data person and really want to know what the risks are of any one of the different side effects, either the local ones on the left or the more systemic ones on the right, and you want to really drill into this data, it's here for you in the New England Journal article. The way that I remember it is about 80% of people are developing local injection site pain. And about half of people are developing some systemic reactions, all of which are really getting better within a couple of days, sometimes much faster, sometimes a little longer. So to summarize, what do we know and what don't we know about the vaccines? I want to be very, very clear on, I think, first what we do know. We know that the vaccines, you've just seen, I think, the vaccines are very, very protective, very quickly and very thoroughly within, as you remember from that graphic, within about 12 days. The second dose then, the question is, well, why should I get the second dose? We give the second dose because it adds what's called durability. It means that not only does your immune system recognize it and make some antibodies or a small amount of memory T cells, but what we do is we give that first dose, we get that protection, and then we give that second dose to train that immune system that it is going to continue to see this spike protein and it better be ready. And the idea then is with durability, we get much longer protection. Of course, it's far too early to know how long the protection from one dose will actually last. We're certainly optimistic it'll be hopefully many months. But as a perhaps back of the napkin estimate, with that second dose, with more durability, we're optimistic that it could be out to a small number of years with the second dose. And so we're clearly hearing from our health leaders, our public health leaders around our community, around the country, that we really should be making sure everyone gets both doses. We know again that mRNA technologies have been around for a while. And as I said, we're waiting for the right disease. The clinical trial efforts have been huge with over 100,000, 200,000 people now enrolled and being studied carefully. And the short-term risks, as I mentioned, mostly injection site reactions and 80% and systemic symptoms in plus or minus 50%, with those very rare severe allergic reactions that we should just simply know about. But perhaps most importantly, what don't we know? What we don't know is exactly how long the protection from the 2-dose vaccine will last. We hope it will be a long time, but we'll wait and see. We don't know yet whether any late side effects will be seen. We're absolutely encouraged. These patients have now been monitored, as I said, for 5+ months, and we're not yet hearing about any of the late side effects, but very important that we've got good systems to continue to monitor for this. We don't, of course, know whether any of the newer variants that we already are aware of or that could pop up in the future could show resistance to the vaccine, but certainly an area of hot research. As I mentioned, it doesn't appear to be the case in the early reviews, but perhaps we would need to update the vaccine down the road. We'll have to see. And perhaps the crux of the public health recommendations that, again, we hear so concretely from Dr. de Reynoso, Dr. Ansorg. I want everyone to be clear on this part. We know that the vaccine protects against people getting sick from SARS-CoV-2 infection, COVID-19. We know that that's what the trial looked at. Remember, it was symptomatic infection. What we don't yet know is whether it also protects against people from picking up the virus, not feeling unwell, perhaps continuing to feel well, but being at risk of infecting others. That's a critical piece that we still don't know. And the reason I emphasize this, it might not seem like that big a deal to you as a vaccine recipient. You're getting the vaccine because you don't want to get sick, and the vaccine is going to stop you from getting sick. But think from a public health perspective, as we try to bend that curve, we really, really need to know that before we could make any recommendations to stop masking, to stop social distancing, or to stop any of the other good public health efforts that are really adjunctive to vaccines, and perhaps more of the cornerstones until we know that that's the case for vaccines. So some final considerations that I'm often asked. The second dose can be given a few days early, as I said. There's no limit to how late the second dose can be given, but we really are aiming to get it as close to the recommended window as possible. The vaccines are not interchangeable. If someone wants to get dose 1 of Pfizer, they really need to stay with that one and not switch. If they were to get dose 2 of Moderna, they have to then, basically start their series again and get dose 2 of Moderna subsequently. Trials are underway. Currently, the EUA lets us go down to age 16 for Pfizer and to age 18 for Moderna. Pregnant women have clearly been told they should be offered the vaccine, particularly if they're in a tier that would otherwise be getting the vaccine, but obviously a conversation with their own physicians. mRNA vaccines are not thought to get into a breastfeeding or breast milk and to be passed on to the infant. And in fact, there's potentially benefit from passive immunity from antibodies passing from lactating mother to their infant, but this can be certainly discussed between a woman and her healthcare provider. There's no data at all to recommend testing antibodies and to use that to tell whether someone should or shouldn't get the vaccine. We simply don't know the answer to that yet. If you've had COVID-19, you can certainly be offered the vaccine, but the recommendation would be to wait until you feel better. You could wait up to 90 days. No, you've got a little bit of natural protection for up to 90 days, but that would be the recommendation. At least wait until you feel better and then get the vaccine. And those who receive monoclonal antibodies should wait at least 90 days before getting vaccinated. Immune-compromised people, please do speak to your physician. So what's coming? I'll just finish with a couple of comments on what's ahead because it's talked about a lot. The AstraZeneca vaccine and the J&J vaccines, I think we're both going to hear about in the next, perhaps this month for AstraZeneca and perhaps J&J for the phase 3 data this month. These are both basically different types of adenoviruses, which is an intact virus, a whole virus now, that's given the DNA of the spike protein, more of a conventional vaccine approach. The AZ vaccine is available in the United Kingdom now. And it's big, I think it's big attraction. And the reason that it's scientists are touting this as a vaccine for the world is that it's much less restrictive with regards to storage. And so it can be refrigerated for up to 6 months, making it much more feasible to deliver it to developing nations. The J&J vaccine, also an adenovirus vaccine, and it's attractive because it's a one pop. Just a single dose vaccine there. Again, these are both very different types of vaccines, but I think good indication that I think more exciting stuff coming. I just wanted to conclude with perhaps my last comment, which is that at Cottage Health, at Cottage Health, we're really, I think, proud to have vaccinated over 3,000 people, close to 3,200 vaccines out already. About 2/3 of our healthcare team have taken vaccine at this point. And we're also working closely with the public health department in ways to support the community efforts that Vaughn is obviously coordinating so well across the county. we're also looking to leverage our retired healthcare workers to help us with some of this effort. And I think maybe some more exciting news on all of this coming, just perhaps even in the next week or so. And with that, Peter, I will pause and say thank you. This is my symbolic iceberg that I end every talk with since February. I think just pointing out perhaps that there's a lot more going on under the water.
Great. Thanks so much, Lynn. Vaughn had to drop off on get to do something else. You know, we have an amazing amount of questions. I can tell you when I give an economics talk, I get one, usually, maybe two questions, you know, like the question will be, what are interest rates going to do in the future? Of course, I don't know the answer to that. But here we have, and I apologize if we don't get to everybody's questions. I mean, a lot have already been answered. You know, so one question I'm seeing was about the second dose. And I actually listened to the podcast of the Turkish-German couple who you know, invented the virus for Pfizer. In that podcast, what they said was the first dose gets you, makes you not get it, but the second dose makes other people not get it. So you can't give it to somebody else. Is that a easier way to say what you said, or am I wrong about that?
I think that's potentially part of the story, but I don't know that the data is completely solid to say that we know that. I think what she's indicating, or what they're indicating, is that that idea that I mentioned about protecting against asymptomatic carriage, meaning even if you don't get sick, making sure that you don't pick it up and carry it and pass it on to someone else. I think that's what she's indicating might be conferred by the second dose. I think that would be great. But again, I think it's mostly durability, mostly how long the protection is going to last that we think we're going to get from the second dose.
I see. And so of those in the hospital, in the ICU, what are you doing for them? What do they get?
As far as vaccine, you mean, or
the drugs? Any drugs? What do they get in terms of, you know, trying to fight it off or whatever?
How long do you have? No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm giggling because my tardiness to the webinar, I apologize, but I was just speaking to all of the physicians at Cottage Health about the clinical updates on exactly this topic. So I would say that the most important, well, I'll brag. I think that Santa Barbara County has done a really good job of taking care of patients with COVID in the hospital. The mortality rate that's published by the CDC across the United States for patients with COVID in the hospital last month is still about 20%, which is staggering. That 1 out of every 5 people in the hospital in the US on that data set was dying from COVID-19. At Cottage, it's 8%, which is, I think, just a testament to, I think we just have, I'm really, really proud of our staff, our nurses, our physicians. I think people have done a really good job. The most important changes to mortality, I think, and length of stay have been the addition of steroids fairly universally. So we know that steroids cool the immune system down and prevent people from maybe getting so much inflammation in their lungs that maybe it decreases the need for being on a ventilator, or perhaps decreases how long they have low oxygen. In addition, we're giving a lot of patients remdesivir. Remdesivir has had a lot of, I would say, press and public interest. Remember, remdesivir is an antiviral that helps decrease how long patients are in the hospital. Again and again in studies that's been shown, which is right now one of the biggest advantages we have is getting people better faster and out of the hospital. What's not so clear is how much it actually impacts mortality and likelihood of dying. And it's for that reason that across the world, the WHO, for example, has been more cautious about recommending remdesivir because it is not cheap. And it is not universally available across the world in developing nations. But again, here in the United States, here in Santa Barbara, certainly here in our ICU, we are leaning, I think, I would say very squarely on steroids and remdesivir, as well as some other aspects of care.
Okay. And so several people ask this question. If you've already had COVID, do you need to get vaccinated?
Good question. I would say absolutely yes. What we know is that coronaviruses, historically, remember, we get over and over again. Whether we're talking about, remember, there are 4 human coronaviruses that are not epidemic that, as a mother of young children, I know come through my house. And we think that maybe, you know, your protection lasts a few months to a small number of years, just depending. There was actually a study done in the UK in the 70s where they deliberately infected a group of poor people hopefully well-consented people with coronavirus every single year to see what kind of protection they got. And, you know, protection probably does last mostly a year, but we certainly have had reinfections for where people have become ill from a, you know, slightly different strain of COVID-19 within a small number of months. And so the public health answer is yes. Even if you had it, you should get it. If it were me, myself, having had COVID, I would absolutely get vaccinated. I would want every tool in my tool belt to protect against this virus.
No, that's right. And so are you tracking, will you be tracking people who get the first dose? Or you're not, or that's not up to you guys to know who's getting the first dose? Are they getting the second dose as well?
Internally at Cottage, I mean, we're tracking all of this very, very carefully, but the state is actually tracking everybody. So everyone, no matter who you are, where you are, if you're vaccinated, you're actually reported, you know, the state database has all the reports of all the people that are getting vaccines. And so that data should be available. I think at this point, you know, honestly, the decision about getting the second dose, put it this way, if you're willing to get the first dose, if you're hearing all this and, you know, want this, which I hope everyone, I really sincerely hope most of you, I welcome the good questions, but again, at this point, I would really encourage people to, when you get an opportunity to get the vaccine, get the vaccine. If you're signing up for the first dose, I would see no reason for an individual to not get the second dose. The reason the second dose question has come up again and again is actually about allocation of resources. It's this idea that if we could, if it gives good enough protection, should we be giving it to, you know, if we have 100 doses to 100 people for kind of maybe long enough protection, or to, or should we give, you know, twice as many people, you know, sorry, should we give it, you understand my point, should we give it to should we give it to more people with, you know, more questionable protection, or should we give it to half as many people with really more confidence? And what we've heard over and over again is really the latter. And so I continue to, I think, endorse that.
I agree with that. And so the final question, we're running a little bit over, but there's just so many questions. But we hear a lot about the variants coming out, the strains coming out, different variants. Is the current vaccine, as you mentioned, that, you know, you can kind of replicate the vaccine as well because it's kind of flexible. Is that what's happening right now, or?
We've had no changes in the vaccine recipe at all. So the vaccine is the vaccine that's been approved, the vaccine that's been studied has not been modified, and the vaccine is the one that's being rolled out. Slightly different with Moderna, with Pfizer. No changes have been made to it. What's being done is the B.1.1.7 variant out of the UK is being very thoroughly, both from an epi perspective, as well as from basic science in the lab perspective, being studied against these two vaccines, the virus against these vaccines. And I think at this point, again, every indication is that the problem with the variant is not about its resistance to the vaccine. At this point, that doesn't seem to be the case. The problem with this variant is how infectious it appears to be. The fact that it's gone from being only a very small proportion of the United Kingdom cases back in September to now really dominating the population of virus circulating in England, particularly Southeast England, that's I think what we're all very worried about. In addition, it does look like there's probably a component that this variant is making it more likely that someone infects more people. What we call, of course, the R value, basically. And right. So those are, I think, the biggest concerns about the variant. My editorial on the variants, until we have robust, thorough monitoring for variants, I'm not willing to panic about variants. Until we know for sure what the majority population of variants, for example, across Santa Barbara County, across San Diego County is, just finding a few cases of this, again, by itself doesn't panic me. What I really want to know is that there's good surveillance ongoing, looking for these new variants to catch them early if or when they arise.
Right, okay. So just a couple more minutes. I want to do something that we did when you weren't here. And that is, I am going to have another poll, and the poll is exactly like the poll we did at the beginning for everyone. I'm going to launch that poll again. And again, the question is, after hearing from our speakers, if the vaccine were available to you today, would you get it? And we saw some results, Lynn, earlier that showed nationally, basically, something like 40% of the people were not willing to possibly get it. So I think we've done a pretty good job. I think we had something like 72% they would definitely get it. Now it's up to 78%. So our goal was to try to educate and get people understanding what was happening here with that. And so this has been very, very, very helpful. And let me just say that there's the results of this poll, 78%. And let me just say that all of these, this recording is going to be available. My slides will be available on our website, Economic Forecast Project website. Lynn will send me any links that she was talking about that would be useful reading, and I'll put some up there as well. And anyway, just please everybody stay safe, listen to the science. It can help. And thank you very much, Lynn, very much appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.